Another bright day here in Virginia, another episode of TFiR Cloud Evolution. I'm your host, Swapnil Bhartia. In this episode, we are joined by, once again, Rob Hirschfeld, CEO and co-founder of RackN, a company which is deeply embedded in infrastructure automation and hybrid IT. Today, we are going to dive into some of the biggest shifts happening across the cloud and open source landscape, all the way from Broadcom's latest report on private cloud to key takeaways from this year's Red Hat Summit, including the role of AI and where is enterprise heading. We will also unpack the latest developments around Terraform and HashiCorp and what does that mean for future of infrastructure as a code and for companies like RackN as well as their customers. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Rob, it's great to have you back on the show.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about. First of all, you folks were at Red Hat Summit. So I want to start with how was the summit? Talk a bit about, of course, the discussions. You were on the show floor, the discussions you had, concerns you had. What was the kind of theme, and what was kind of your also, hey, this was something not seen in the previous Red Hat Summits. This is now here. So just give us a total update on the summit.
Oh, there was a lot going on. Red Hat is very focused on OpenShift. They're very focused on AI. They're very focused on Ansible automation platform, and those pieces all converge at the summit. So, one of the things I really liked about the summit is they talked a lot about customer success and customer stories. There was a lot of customers on stage talking about big virtual machine migrations. OpenShift virtualization is top of mind for the people at the show and what people were talking about. Interesting to me, it's early, so those things weren't reflected in, there weren't as many sessions strictly about OpenShift virtualization. I think we were the only vendors on the floor with a real OpenShift virtualization story from, sort of how to get you started and how to help with that. So what we're seeing is there's a lot of new, exciting technology coming out of Red Hat right now, and we're very excited about it. And at the same time, how you execute on that technology is still being figured out, right? AI is a great example. The virtualization pieces are a great example. Ansible, which is, just the standard in, DevOps automation, and Red Hat's platform is Ansible automation platform, often used interchangeably, I find. There's actually a lot going on how it gets integrated with Terraform, which IBM had just completed the acquisition before the summit. So quite, all those pieces are all coming together at the show in a really interesting way.
Can you talk about HashiCorp? Because when the whole license change happened, you and I had a lot of discussion. OpenTofu was created, but with the IBM's acquisition, what has changed there?
It's not sure yet that very much has changed. The Tofu fork seems to be moving along, but the enthusiasm and excitement around Terraform or Tofu isn't there in the market as much. A lot of the Terraform orchestrator buzz seems to have died down. The companies that are promoting that with Tofu at the base seem to be doing their work. But it's strange to me. We just don't see the same level of enthusiasm for Terraform that there was a couple of years ago. It's still very prevalent and very widely used, and there's still enthusiasm to integrate it into other platforms. But as a standalone component, we're just not seeing people talk about it as much.
I remember the early days when IBM spent billions of dollars on Linux, and they also created one of the most popular ads for Linux. Now when we look at this acquisition of HashiCorp, what was in there for IBM through this acquisition? Because of the license change, HashiCorp lost a lot of goodwill, a lot of the image they had there. At the same time, IBM also acquired Red Hat, and Red Hat runs as an independent company where IBM is seen as their client. They are still the open source company. So they did not touch anything that Red Hat was doing. So are they going to touch anything that Hashi is doing to fix the mistake they might have made?
I can only give you what my crystal ball tells you on this one. One of the things I actually think makes the IBM Red Hat integration work very well is that IBM's not shy about making money from product. And so it really provided the, hey, we're going to sell product pieces for Red Hat, a place to grow. HashiCorp, I think, is a very different company when it was in. It was really multiple products that were loosely coupled together. So I think IBM's going to do a great job with Vault. I think they're going to, Nomad is competitive. So I think that's a challenge for people. There's a couple of bits and bytes that are, interesting, but just self-maintaining, like Vagrant. And I think the big question becomes what happens with Terraform, and if they open source it again or merge it back into Tofu or things like that. But Swap, I'll tell you, I don't think most enterprise customers care, which is what IBM cares about. They want supported products. They're going to get supported products if they get Terraform. And it's not really a big open source hand-wringing dilemma from that perspective. It matters, very narrowly in the industry. It matters if you're HashiCorp and you're competing with the other companies that were using Terraform. But from an IBM's perspective and a Red Hat perspective, Red Hat makes money selling enterprise Linux. They sell Kubernetes badged as OpenShift with a whole bunch of extra stuff on top of it. They sell Ansible automation platform. And the extent to which Terraform can help them sell or make Ansible automation platform more powerful, they're all in. The extent to which it's integrated into other platforms, I don't think there's as much excitement about that. And one of the things I saw at Red Hat Summit is they have a very concrete plan for Ansible automation platform. It is the migration engine to move from VMware to OpenShift virtualization. And if you're going to do that migration using Red Hat tools or with IBM consulting, you're going to be using Ansible automation platform. So they have a lot invested in making that a great platform. Terraform is already integrated to that, and they're going to extend those integrations. So, from an enterprise consumer perspective, from our audience's perspective, there's no drama. And while that's not newsworthy, drama is newsworthy, no drama is actually what most customers want.
And what does it mean for RackN?
We have great integrations. We're very focused on that bare metal side and providing that cloud of metal infrastructure and making that full life cycle go. And so the extent to which people want to use Ansible automation to build and automate infrastructure, we provide the missing piece on the hardware life cycle. It's very important for us from that perspective. The same thing is true on OpenShift virtualization or OpenShift for AI and GPU farms, where it's all bare metal operations. We're providing the critical missing hardware lifecycle controls and API-driven infrastructure that companies need to just make it work, right? The easy button for bare metal. So from that perspective, we're filling a great gap. When IBM and Red Hat make those things easier to consume and provide the orchestration layers that customers need to drive, a bigger story, every time that helps us. And we're just looking at accelerating. The process improvements that you get from using these platforms is stunning. And the ROIs from process improvements is actually the real secret for anything bare metal. Is the process improvement is actually the secret to getting high ROI.
Of course, these days, one of the hottest topic is AI, and also Red Hat is betting a lot on that. Also, they are changing the way their Linux distribution works. Talk a bit about one of the hottest news, not from the perspective of press, but from the lenses of Rob.
There's a lot of things that came out because there's Red Hat 10 also came out, and there's some pieces about that I want to get to. The thing that I really found remarkable is just how much Red Hat and IBM too, because they have the bona fides on AI, are doing to help companies really run the inference side of AI. Because that's really where enterprises are going to be very focused. They're not as worried about building large language models, they're consuming these models. And machine learning too for smaller models. What Red Hat announced at this summit was something that they've been building for a while, and they're really pulling together the pieces for now. There's something called VLLM, which I kept hearing as VLM or VLLM. It was confusing, but VLLM, which is a consistent shim layer for different models. So what it allows you to do is build your AI-enabled application use via LLM, and then put in whichever models are appropriate or cost effective for your system. So it actually gives you a lot of freedom in how you use the system. And I like this approach for Red Hat because they're not trying to become a model provider. They're trying to become a dev tooling optimizing platform. And so the extent to which they're enabling developers to build AI applications, which is what we're seeing over and over again, that's a really significant win. They also announced a way to take it's not VLM, but it's more like an AI proxy or an AI router, where you can take requests, filter it through the router, and it will find available running models so that you can actually take and distribute workload across many machines. That's been a missing piece for a lot of enterprises looking at how to scale up their LLM activity. So this basically lets you create a model farm. And that coming technology, I think, is going to be really important for customers who are trying to scale their AI inferencing infrastructure. So really significant for that. It's also worth noting, this didn't come up in the show as much, which is surprising, but OpenShift, from our customer experience, is the preferred model, OS and platform for AI training. So if people are building training infrastructure, they're often turning to OpenShift as the supported version for this. So Red Hat's winning in a lot of cases. The VLLM pieces and the model router pieces, I think, only make it easier for enterprises to adopt, and that's fundamentally a really significant win for people. And I should note, VLLM is open source, so it's a technology that's widely available. A lot of companies are collaborating. It's a great example of open source really winning for building a community and having a lot of different players. And so as new models come out, they're very quickly plugged into the VLLM ecosystem, and people can take advantage of them from that perspective. So it's sort of a necessary shim layer in community.
Now, when I look at RackN, you folks deal with, of course, infrastructure, code, bare metal. What does AI mean to you, and what does Red Hat's announcement baking in AI mean for RackN?
It's funny because we actually see AI surfacing both from bare metal and also from some of the OpenShift virtualization layers, and I'll explain both. So anytime people are doing AI inferencing, they're using very expensive servers because of the AI components. They often want to have many GPUs or GPU cards. They want to have very highly performant systems with complex networking. As the complexity of systems goes up, the need for more complex and integrated bare metal management gets very high. AI systems still have high failure rates. The GPUs often fail. They get run very hot. They have they need to be reset. They're being patched with increasingly frequency. So you need to be able to apply the correct firmware to your GPU. So all of those operations are fundamentally bare metal operations. And the faster you can go through those, the more reliably you can go through those processes, the more ROI you're going to get out of those servers. Right? We talked to people in the industry, and sometimes they'll have servers that take 3 to 5 days for a reset because of the automation and processes they have to go through. When we can take that down to under an hour, it's transformative to how quickly they can set up and run workloads. So bare metal and AI are fundamentally linked technologies, and a lot of companies are looking at AI as having a data locality challenge to it, meaning they don't want to be transiting data that they run through AI systems or building models all over the place. So data sovereignty, owning infrastructure, repatriating, all of those things are absolutely critical in the AI conversation. So when people when enterprises talk about AI, they also talk about, where am I going to run the models? How am I going to protect the data? How am I going to afford to run the infrastructure? How can I save money because AI servers are so expensive? And owning your servers is actually a very effective way. If you have a a 7 or a longer month expectation for run the systems, then buying the systems is actually a very cost-effective way to do it. Repatriation and cost savings from self-hosting is very, very real, especially with RackN as an overlay, where we're helping our customers negotiate discounts from OEMs, 30% or higher. It's a pretty significant win from that perspective. That's a lot of additional hardware you can buy when you get discounts. One other point I wanted to make on the RHEL Summit. So one other technology piece I didn't fully talk about. So RHEL 10 and some of the work that Red Hat's doing to drive towards immutable operating systems. So CoreOS, image deploy technology, what they used to call boot C, but they're branding now as image deploy. These are technologies where you're doing immutable boots or you're doing image-based deploys based on container images. It's incredibly powerful, very exciting technology. That is going to be deeply embedded into RHEL going forward. And customers who are using Red Hat Enterprise Linux today need to be thinking through how they're going to be moving towards immutable deployments, right? This is something RackN is really helping customers set up, deploy, figure out, automate. Because what we're finding is that when customers look at OpenShift as a platform, they need to also be using CoreOS as the underlying OS for that cluster. Not something that a lot of enterprises have experience with. So you have to be able to deploy and manage CoreOS, which is managed differently than Red Hat Enterprise Linux. You have to be able to secure that. You have to be able to manage life cycles for those systems. And the image deploy is going to drive it another step further, where the systems actually aren't built as images. They're actually built up as containers and then applied to systems. So there's some really fascinating ways in which the whole RHEL lifecycle is becoming more developer friendly. But we know very well from dealing with large enterprise, that doesn't mean the operators and the admins have the same tooling. They don't always know what to do, especially when it comes to bare metal. So we're very excited to see the improvements that RHEL 10 is bringing into the ecosystem. Because I think they're great improvements. They're also things that we really provide competitive advantages for enterprises to adopt. So we make it much easier to adopt those technologies, and we make them much more robust and resilient from an operations perspective. So those are really significant changes coming into Red Hat customers.
Now let's talk about Broadcom, the report around private cloud. Have you seen the report? And if you have, what do you make out of it?
I've definitely seen Broadcom's survey talking about the increase in repatriation and self-managed infrastructure. It made the rounds pretty remarkably. A lot of people resonate with the idea that there's additional bare metal infrastructure, self-managed infrastructure coming back, that there is some cloud retreat. I think that our data, our experience in the field aligns with what that research was saying. The thing that we found interesting about it is it's coming from Broadcom. And so it's very hard to decouple the statements they were making from the source of the statements, because Broadcom has really burned a lot of credibility in market. And from that perspective, and we see a incredibly broad-based retreat from VMware as the hypervisor of choice. So while Broadcom, I think, is correct in saying repatriation and self-managed infrastructure are very real for enterprises, I don't think that infers that VMware is going to get pulled into that market opportunity from there. And this is by no way saying cloud is dead. Cloud is not dead. Cloud's an important part of the whole mix here. But more and more companies are recognizing that they can save money by having their self-managed gear. They can improve security. They can have better data sovereignty. They can actually manage their infrastructure very effectively by using next generation techniques to manage their infrastructure and revisit decisions that they were making to try and leave, their 2000 era data center infrastructure.
Of course, you and I also talk about Kubernetes a lot.
Yeah.
And because that's one of the, if I'm not wrong, the hottest and one of the biggest open source project and one of the technologies that almost everybody, just the way Docker container fee used to talk about. Of course, these days everybody's talking about AI, agentic agents, agentic AI. Can you talk about what are some of the, because Red Hat's market, it's a very mature market. It's for ages 30, 40 years since the kernel came out. But what are some of the pain points? Because as folks are moving to cloud, they don't run their own infrastructure at some extent as well. But what are some of the pain points that you're like, while this is a mature space, these are still some of the problems which also resonate the concern throughout the industry, irrespective of whether you're dealing with container, whether you're doing AI, whether you're dealing with Kubernetes, Edge, or of course, infrastructure anything as such was there where you're like, these are like, universal challenges that we have to solve?
When we talk to customers and when I listen to the problems that we hear about in the field, right, when we're talking to prospects or helping customers improve, we have seen over and over again that, bare metal automation, and this is why we specialize in bare metal. It's such a foundational layer that if you can improve your process controls and governance at that layer, everything you build on top of it just becomes more effective, easier, faster, and more flexible. And so I really do think that companies who look at self-managed repatriated workloads, they can easily skip over the foundational layer, the bare metal infrastructure, and jump right to, I need VMware, I need OpenShift, I need, Nutanix, I need a platform on top of all this stuff. Some of those, like Nutanix, include hardware lifecycle management, and you create an all-in platform, but you're very tied into their ecosystem when you do that. What we're finding is if you really can deliver, best-in-class bare metal automation that's multi-vendor, that's flexible and API-driven, then you dramatically accelerate your time to execute projects, your flexibility on vendors, your ability to bring in new capabilities. Even just something as simple, this is going to sound silly, but it's something as simple as staying current on the current version of a platform or within one version of their release transforms the cost models for that infrastructure. It means you're taking advantage of new features. It means you're staying in support. It means you're not fighting bugs that have been fixed. Right? Companies get incredible benefits when they're able to move more agilely towards the current versions and move forward. The idea that, if you have your own data center infrastructure and you're going to be using end-of-life software and struggling with every patch and can't keep it all updated and things like that, that's what we were dealing with 10 years ago. And it's very expensive. It's very hard. Your infrastructure is fragile. But it doesn't have to be like that, right? We know that customers can have very fast moving, very innovative teams if they do things and take the time to build things right. And then adding in OpenShift virtualization, moving from VMware to OpenShift, those are very fast transitions. They don't have to take years to plan. But you have to do it by building that foundational layer first so that you can iterate more quickly at the top layer. If you do it from the top down, you're going to find that the bottom layers are going to fight you all the time.
Rob, once again, thank you so much for joining me today and give us an update on the summit and, of course, the Broadcom's report survey. Thank you for great insight. And as usual, I look forward to chat with you again. Thank you.
It's always a pleasure, Swap. Thank you.